You can't do any research into the work of James McDonald without examining the Heflin case. McDonald was fascinated by the Heflin case. In fact, he couldn't let it go.
August 3rd, 1965, Santa Ana, California, approximately 12:30 p.m. Traffic investigator Rex Heflin is about to take a picture of a tree branch that is obscuring a road sign. But out of the corner of his eye, he witnesses something fascinating. A saucer-shaped craft moving across the horizon just 150 feet above the ground. According to Heflin, he snaps these 3 pictures with his Polaroid 101 instant camera. As the object travels left to right across the road, the first, taken through the front windshield, clearly shows a saucer-shaped object that appears to be off in the distance flying above the ground. The second seems to show the same disc as taken through the side window of Heflin's truck. In the third picture, the object seems to be smaller, as if traveling away from the camera. Within 2 minutes, the alleged saucer disappears, but leaves behind a peculiar smoke ring in the sky.
James McDonald wasn't the only person fascinated by the Rex Heflin case. The Air Force investigated it, Project Blue Book investigated it, and also the Condon Committee investigated this case. All of those groups dismissed the case as a hoax.
Project Blue Book was the Air Force's official program studying UFO phenomenon until 1968, when the Condon Committee, headed by physicist Edward Condon, determined that UFO research was unlikely to yield any serious results. Blue Book was abandoned 2 years later, in 1970, but James McDonald believed Condon's conclusions were highly flawed and showed a blatant disregard for the high number of unexplained incidents. Bill's investigation begins with Ann Druffel, who not only maintains copies of the Heflin photographs, but is also James McDonald's biographer.
And these photos have become almost like the holy grail of ufology.
It did, but you see, Rex Heflin didn't think anything of it. He had lent them first to 2 military sources that wanted to analyze them, and both of these sources returned them.
But then, according to McDonald's files, Heflin states that 2 men claiming to be from NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command, asked to borrow the photos.
Now, Rex Heflin was used to working with official sources because of his job. So he gave them the photos, expecting that they would be returned within a few days, but they never were. And all we had left were second-generation copies.
After Heflin claims his originals are not returned, the U.S. Air Force officially labels them a photographic hoax. With only copies to analyze, some debunkers claim to see a line just above the UFO, indicating some type of wire or connection to the object. Others disagree, saying these are defects or alterations seen only in the copies. Without the original photos, there is no way to be sure.
So suddenly other copies of the photos began to spread through parts of the community, the UFO community.
Yes, of course they had been altered.
So if one were paranoid, one would say there was some kind of a disinformation thing going on with various copies of the photos that kept turning up.
Some believe that the originals were taken for precisely this reason.
And then, almost 20 years later, something miraculous happens.
One day his phone rang, and a woman's voice said, "Have you checked your mailbox lately?" And Rex was puzzled, but he went out and he saw an envelope there. He opened it, and there were the 3 original photos that the so-called NORAD men had borrowed 20 years before or so.
Today, Ann Druffel is the closest source for getting to the original photographs taken by Heflin, and she gives Bill copies of the photos for further analysis.
Heflin died in 2005 and never wavered from his story that he photographed an actual object, albeit an unusual object. The question remains today: did he hoax the photo, or was it a real object